So today I'm going to be talking to one of my fellow social media content creators, Dr. Nancy Yen Shipley, and she is an orthopedic specialist based in Portland, Oregon, in the United States. She also creates content for a number of different social media platforms, including Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and she runs a podcast entitled The 6% with Nancy MD. Nancy, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me here.
Not a problem. This is a pleasure to have you. It's always nice to connect with other social media content creators, and especially ones who are orthopedic surgeons, because we are ortho for life.
Ortho strong.
Exactly. So please, let's get started right away and tell me, Nancy, who is Dr. Nancy Yen Shipley, and what do you do day to day?
So, as you mentioned, I am an orthopedic surgeon. I kind of took this unusual and circuitous route to orthopedic surgery. I started out as a late bloomer in college. I didn't know I was going to go into medicine, and got a not very good GPA graduating from UCLA. So that kind of dashed my hopes for, getting into medical school. But, I kind of took a different route. I had a different career before medicine. I worked a little bit in the snowboarding industry, mainly for lack of knowing what I wanted to do when I grew up. And so I was like, well, I'm just going to go do something fun. And I traveled around and I snowboarded and I did a little marketing and sales. I got a little bit of training in acupuncture along the way as well, and learned a lot about Chinese medicine, and worked along my stepdad's side, helping him run his business in that arena before I said, I actually think I do want to go to medical school, which was my original thought going into college. And this time for the right reasons, because I was actually interested in it, not because it was what it was expected of me. And so as a mid-20-something, I decided to apply to medical school after taking all of my post-bac classes while working full-time, taking the MCAT, and I started medical school at almost 30.
Giddy up.
Yeah, so I took this unusual route into medicine. And once I discovered orthopedic surgery, first as a first-year medical student shadowing a family friend, and then as a third-year medical student in my rotations, I was sold. I was like, this is it for me. It kind of didn't bother me that there weren't a lot of women in orthopedics, and there were certainly people that said, there aren't a lot of women. You might not be strong enough. Are you sure you're gonna find a husband if you become an orthopedic surgeon? Which I did, by the way. We found each other. And a lot of people who doubted me, and I think that made me say, I'm gonna prove you wrong. And so I ended up in orthopedics. I found my passion within orthopedics, which is the shoulder, sports, arthroscopy, and now I'm in private practice in Portland, Oregon, in the US. And I'm a surgeon, I'm a mom, I'm a podcaster, as you mentioned, I write, and I also speak. So I'm I always have a bunch of things going on. I've got my hands into a little bit of everything. And I love it this way. It keeps me busy.
All right. So, I never want to take delight in anybody's, misfortune. But I have to say, because I was a little bit older, I did a few things before I got into medicine. I have to say that it is refreshing and entertaining to hear somebody with a story that kind of mirrors mine a little bit, and then go, okay, geez, I wasn't the oldest one to go to school. So that it's nice and refreshing to hear that. And clearly, things have been good for you because, you're successful. You have a number of things on your plate. So I don't think, I have students that ask all the time, am I too old? Am I too old? Am I too old? But I think both you and I are both examples that no, you're not too old. If you have a desire, go do it, because, if you really want it, it'll happen.
Exactly. That's what I tell people all the time.
Yes. So tell me now, obviously, so you're a social media content creator. And we talked a little bit about how you got into orthopedics, how that journey began.
Mm-hmm.
But tell us, how did your social media journey begin?
Well, I started out writing. I think probably about 3 years ago, everything was going great in practice. I loved what I did. I loved the surgeries. I loved my patients, but several years into practice, and I think I should know this about myself now, and that's if I don't keep learning something new, and not just within orthopedics, but if I don't keep developing myself, that I start to feel stagnant. And I was at that point where I was like, okay, I'm doing well in practice. I'm, enjoying what I'm doing there, but I just felt like something was missing. And it didn't occur to me until I started to think about it really pretty recently that I remembered that when I was 14, 15, if you asked me what I wanted to do, I wanted to be a writer and or a journalist. And I really enjoyed storytelling. And did I lose you on Zoom? Are we
Don't
okay?
don't worry, carry on.
Okay. You know what? I actually think I've lost audio here. I can hear you on Instagram Live. So do you want me to reconnect to the meeting?
You could do that.
Okay. All right. Let me do that real quick. And for some reason, Zoom shut down on us. So I apologize. You'll have to help me figure out where I was train of thought wise.
There are always technical issues, man. This
It's
is the internet.
challenges of technology, huh?
Exactly. But no
Yeah,
worries.
I can hear you on Instagram, but for some reason the Zoom is not working. Did I disappear off your Zoom?
Yeah, you did. You dropped off, but that's
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, I'm seeing the spinning circle of death. What would you like me to do?
Carry on Instagram. Don't
All right,
worry about Zoom.
we'll carry on.
That's
Let
right.
me turn let me turn up the volume so I can hear you there. All
Yeah.
right.
So
Okay, so
yeah, and you were talking just about what were you saying now?
I was becoming stagnant.
Yes, journalist, writing, all of that.
Yeah, and I started to realize that, oh, I've always really enjoyed writing. I've really enjoyed just kind of figuring out how to use words to convey feeling and to convey what's happening in my mind, in my heart, and around me. And so I started to blog. I just said, okay, well, I'll set up my website. It's so easy to just, you get on Weebly or you get on one of those website creation things. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was like, okay, well, let me throw something up. And it's just another way for people to go online and find me. And in the meantime, I'll put some blogs up. And so I would blog about orthopedic topics. I would blog about being a woman in medicine, being a mom, and a surgeon. And I started to find that people would reach out to me on the content, and I think my patients and prospective patients found the information helpful on the orthopedic topics. But I think that when I wrote about the other aspects of being in medicine and being in orthopedics, that it really resonated with a lot of people. And for that reason, I said, okay, well, I should probably get on social media. I will, I'll get on Instagram. It was just, arbitrarily chosen at that time. Now I've kind of learned a lot about the different platforms and understand a little bit more about what you use one for versus the other. But I got onto Instagram and I just started posting pictures of life as a surgeon, sometimes in the OR, sometimes just me being a wife and a mom, and what my day-to-day was like. And it just kind of grew from there. I found that there was this want and this need out there for informal mentorships like this. And I got a lot of questions about what it was like to be a surgeon and what it took, and, you know, and how did I balance family life and being a physician. So it just grew from there, and I learned a lot more about the different platforms, and it went from having my webpage to having an Instagram account to making sure I had a Facebook account. And then I went on Twitter. I didn't understand Twitter for the longest time.
I still
Totally,
don't understand it. I still don't.
it totally confuses me. And, I'm getting a handle on it now, but I got on Twitter, and I really enjoy that. So now I've got my fingers in kind of a lot of different places on social media. I have a YouTube channel, which always stands to have some improvement. But that's how I ended up getting onto social media, and that led to being invited to be a social media ambassador for the AAOS, the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, and also led to speaking opportunities. So it's been good.
Excellent, excellent. And, you know, it's amazing that in such a short time you have sort of established such a breadth of touches on the social media, or in the social media sphere, because, you know, trying to develop any one of those platforms, I have discovered is difficult. And then trying to develop several at once is quite onerous. So I think that's quite amazing what you've managed to accomplish in a short period. So let me ask you a question, and you know, this relates to what you've just spoken about, but also about you know, what you've done for the AEOS. And let's talk about education for a second. And in a general sense, why are you interested in education? You know, and let me just preface that by saying, and there's nothing wrong with doing this, what I'm going to talk about, but yeah. I know several of my colleagues, you know, that graduated at the same time, some people I train with, and they're like, dude, I am going to do my 9 to 5. Well, for us, it's like 7 to whatever, right. 7 to 7. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do my call, and then I'm going to go chill at the cottage on the weekend. I am not going to, don't give me no residents, don't give me no medical students. I'm going to just put my head down, do my duty, and peace. I'm out. I'm going to retire at whatever, 65, and I'm done, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But other people, such as yourself, such as myself, and lots of other people, we're interested in education. So tell me, why are you interested in education?
All right, can I put my headphones back on? Because I think I'm back on Zoom with you. All right, there we go. Let me mute this. Yeah, the internet's being finicky. All right, I'm back with this is like my security blanket.
No worries, no worries. It's 2020 internet.
I know, exactly, right? Well, you know, to answer your question about my interest in education, I feel like it's not enough for me to do the 9 to 5 and then just go home and not think about it. I really enjoy and crave that connection. I think that one of the things being in private practice that I miss is that you don't have that camaraderie. You miss out a little bit on the academic parts of being a resident or being a fellow, and kind of having morning conference and being able to have that discourse, and not just the academic part, but also just the camaraderie part of it. And so there's a little bit of an echo and I can't hear myself. I'm sorry. This is like classic 2020. Yeah, I think I'm just hearing, oh, you know what? I'm gonna unmute myself. Is that better?
For me, it sounds the same.
Okay, it's better. It's magical. Okay. So, you know, and I think that's what I miss about training, and kind of like you, I am in private practice. I'm not doing research. We talked a little bit about this before we started. I'm not doing research. I'm not publishing journals. And so, I'm not uh, up there on the podium all that much being in the role that I am. But, I think that going on social media has been a way to make that connection not only with other surgeons and have an outlet and a way to talk about clinical cases and the so-called soft topics within orthopedics, such as practice management, marketing, social media, but also connect with other individuals who are hoping to go into the field, hoping to go into medicine, and be sort of a virtual mentor, because that exists now. And so, it's been a really nice way to round out what I do on a day-to-day basis as a surgeon.
Now, so given that you are a social media ambassador for the AEOS, and given what you just said about education, do you feel that social media is an effective medium or an effective tool to use for education?
I think it is. I think that, it's interesting. And I was on Twitter today and following a thread where one of our colleagues had asked whether, it was a good platform for education and what are some of the tips. And I think there was a really good point made. And of course, I can't remember who said it now, but another surgeon said, make sure that the information that you're getting on social media, on Twitter or YouTube, whatever, that you take it for what it is, and that is one individual talking about their experience, talking about a particular technique, and to not forget about peer-reviewed literature, right? And if you're a surgeon trying to learn from what you're seeing online, don't forget about the research that's out there and what gold standard clinical practice guidelines are. But that said, I do think that social media is a wonderful way to round out your education as a surgeon. And, I think ViewMedi's been around for a long time. That's been an amazing way to get a peek into the OR of surgeons, world-class surgeons, and see what techniques they're using and find ways to refine your own. And then going beyond surgeon to surgeon education, I think for individuals who are, either residents or medical students and just want to learn a little bit more about what it's like to be a surgeon and, what are ways to do well on a rotation, or what are the best ways to get onto that pathway. I think social media is fantastic for that. And then, of course, the third piece of it is the general public. I think that this is a really great way to reach people and have a much wider reach than you normally would as, just a surgeon in private practice, is to kind of create content, put that out there, and for the general public to consume, whether they are in your city, your country, or whatnot. You can reach people globally this way, as you know. And so, but, I would say to the general public, as you're kind of consuming this and learning online, again, it's look at the credentials. Who are you listening to? Who are you learning from? Is this, that you see a lot of people who will say, I'm Dr. So-and-so, but is this person an MD or a DO?
Yeah.
Or are they, or are they a different type of doctor? And does this person have chiropractic credentials or podiatry credentials? And I'm not knocking any other field, but I think it's important to know, okay, what's the training that this person has received, and that way you kind of have, you can think about it in terms of that. So,
So having said all of that, and you spoke about speaking to different audiences, but who, like, if you were to say, this is my primary audience, like, who is your primary audience? And maybe it's different on each platform, but who is your intended, when you are putting stuff out every day, who are you sending it to?
Yeah, that's such a hard question to answer, because I think that my audience varies depending on the platform, and even just, depending moment to moment. For example, my podcast, the 6% with Nancy MD, I interview women who are thriving in male dominated fields. And this is not just medicine. Of course, I always try to include some of my sisters in medicine and in surgery. But I talk to CEOs, I talk to a Major League Baseball coach, I talk to venture capitalists, and, really the span of careers that these women are in are just widely variable. And so I would say the audience for my podcast, for example, are women majority, but also a lot of men. Actually, I get a lot of great feedback, who just like to hear inspiring stories and like to get tips and pearls from individuals who have kind of pushed through adversity and pushed through different paths to get to where they are. There's always something good to learn, and there's always good advice kind of packed into those episodes. And so I would say that audience tends to be a little bit more broad. Whereas when I'm on Twitter, there tends to be a lot of conversation within those who are in healthcare. Not exclusively, but that tends to be when there is discussion or discourse back and forth. It tends to be with other surgeons or people who are nurse practitioners, PAs, nursing, and PT, and we talk about a lot of different topics on there. And then, and I think I also post just some of the funny things that happen in my day-to-day, and off the wall goofy things that I think about and talk about, and that goes on there too, because that's kind of just a part of who I am, and I'm not afraid of sharing that. It's just, here I am. So yeah, I think it really just depends on the platform. On Instagram, I tend to have a lot of folks who are either in medicine or hoping to go into medicine. So my content on there tends to be more directed to that audience.
Okay. So speaking of goofy things, tell me, what is the craziest thing that has happened to you as a result of your social media journey?
Well, I think that I don't know if it's crazy so much as just surprising, pleasantly surprising. I've been asked to speak more as a result. I was, first of all, I was pleasantly surprised when AOS reached out to me to become a social media ambassador. And I think, you and I, like, kind of being in private practice situations, it's like, oh, me? You want me? And I was like, absolutely, I'll do it. But, I've had just kind of random reach outs to speak. And I've discovered my love of public speaking. And so I've done both in-person live engagements, but now with COVID, we've pivoted into more digital opportunities, and that's been great as well. Mm-hmm. And I would add to that the other great thing that's kind of come of it was just me sort of segueing into podcasting as well, and I've really enjoyed that.
Excellent. Well, as we were saying before we started the stream, the effective power of this, of this media to connect with people has opened up so many doors, and I echo your sentiment that being a community surgeon, you wouldn't have thought, oh, these organizations would want to hear anything from you. But interestingly enough, they're starting to understand the power of social media, mm-hmm. and they're like, hey, let me, I don't know anything about this. Let me ask Nancy, because it looks like she's got it going on. Right? So I think that is something that's quite interesting, and as you say, it's very pleasantly surprising.
Absolutely. I mean, I've connected with so many surgeons where I've only admired them and their work from afar,
that's right.
And I'm like, you want to ask me? So it's great.
So tell me then, and I have my own ideas about this because I know how much time it consumes for me, But what is the relative proportion of time that you spend each day or each week creating social media content versus time that you spend being a physician?
You know, I unfortunately we have to cap it at 100% as the absolute amount, right? Like I always tell people that I wish I could clone myself because like I need to be in three places at once. I actually, you know, of the stuff that I create and that I put out there, it is like this very, very tiny amount of what actually is happening in my brain ideas wise. And I'm like, oh, I should do this. And oh, I should do that. Wait, I don't have enough time. But you know, I would say that it's still 95% physician, you know, surgeon, that work wise, you know, obviously we're not talking about family time and all the personal stuff, but, you know, I think that it is still majority clinical stuff, and I squeeze in here and there wherever I can, working on my podcast and like creating content for social media, and there's always a little bit of give and take there. So it's still mostly being a clinical physician, but when I find time, I try to, you know, keep things fresh on my social media and continue to record new episodes, for my podcast. So it's definitely a little bit of a juggling act.
Most definitely, and I have to
Mm-hmm.
commend you because I know just how much work it is to do all of this. And you know, when I look at what the content that you have, and just little things like such as the actual branding and how it all ties together, you have that nailed down. And so,
Thank you.
you know, I have to commend you for that because if you're spending that small proportion of time, you are way ahead of the game. You are more organized than I am. You are knocking that out of the park.
Oh, thanks.
So let me ask you now, if you are to think about your social media aspect of your career, what are your goals? Let's say let's go. What are your 5-year goals for your social media career?
Well, you know, like I said, I have like, you know, of the things that actually get put out there, that's probably a small percentage of all of my ideas and all the things that I want to do. I would love to be able to bring more of those ideas to fruition. I am writing a book. I've started writing a book and really excited about it. And I don't want to say too much quite yet until it comes together more, but it ties in to the things that we've talked about. It ties into the amazing and inspiring stories of the women on my podcast. And so I'm really excited about that. So 5 years from now, I would like to add published author, you know, to the list of things that I am. I would love to do more video content. I would love to do more collaborative work in highlighting other interesting people, whether in medicine or outside of it. And again, like, you know, the people that I talk to on my podcast who are just thriving and kind of forging their own paths. I think it would be really, really cool to produce and host a show like that. And so, you know, I plan to continue writing. I plan to continue blogging and developing what I have on my own platforms, but I would love to kind of take a little pivot there as well and continue to practice medicine.
Excellent. So now, when you think about your orthopedic career and you think about social media, um, and you look to the future, do you see these as two separate things that you're going to be working on, although related, or do you just do you look forward to your career in the future and see them as intertwined, intimately intertwined with one another?
I think they're always going to be intertwined. They're hard to separate. You know, I think being a physician, being a surgeon is so much a part of who I am that, you know, I think that's always going to be there. It's always a part of my identity, you know, and while I'm not you know, I'm not closing the door to pivoting necessarily. It's hard at this point in my career to imagine not actually doing the shoulder surgeries that I do and the clinical work that I do. But I do like to strive towards being a Renaissance woman and kind of having this multifaceted career in life in which I'm not a one-trick pony. And I encourage other women and other people to kind of be Renaissance people as well, because it just makes life that much more interesting. You know, when you kind of develop different sides of yourself. So I think that I would still be a physician, I'd still be a surgeon, but you know, as I grow my social media platform and other projects, I think they'll still kind of be intertwined.
Okay, so you talked about this just a little bit, but I'm going to put you on the spot.
Oh boy.
All right. So, is there? Would you conceive of? And I know for myself, I love what I do, man. I love being in the OR. I love the surgeries. I love it. But would you ever conceive of doing only social media, interviews, all of that, and not the orthopedic surgery, not the actual clinical work?
Yeah, you know, that's very hard to imagine right now, but I would never say, I would never close the door on that. I think I would be open to it if the time was right. I mean, it's just you just never know what life is going to bring you, and I think that these are all things that I love enough that I could do either full time, but probably not now, probably not in the next 5 years. But if something changed where, you know, an opportunity presented itself to me, then I would evaluate it. And I would say, okay, well, does this fit into my life values? You know, does it check all those boxes for what I hope to achieve in this lifetime? Does it contribute to, you know, what I hope to leave as my legacy? And I think I would have to ask myself those questions before, you know, I just said, I'm done with surgery because I love it too much.
No, I hear
So,
you. I
yeah,
hear you.
yeah.
Okay. Now, somebody asked here, and I'm gonna belie my age because I had to like zoom, like I'm having trouble looking at the small print here. But it said, so with your content creation, do either of you guys engage a marketing agency, and what accountabilities do you expect from the marketing agency if you do so? So I'll throw that question to you. Is this all just Nancy Yen Shipley, or are you getting any kind of assistance with the stuff that you do?
So I don't work with marketing agencies at all. Like all the things that I think of like come from me, and so I may not be the best person to answer that question, but I will say that sometimes some of the tasks I will delegate occasionally. I actually use it very minimally to a virtual assistant, and it's just kind of like saying, okay, I've created this content. Can you please schedule it on a calendar every Tuesday or whatever. And so those are some of the things that I will hand off. But I think it's incredibly important for me being on social media that everything that is on there is legitimately and authentically me. So that's something that I don't compromise on. But I do feel like some of the things that are, I don't want to say menial, but I mean like just time consuming, are okay to hand off. And if you have the capability to have somebody help you with that, I think, you know, by all means, you know, I think that as the content creator, you have to focus on the big picture. You have to focus on what you're doing from a very high level. And if you get mired in the details of like, you know, oh, I got to move this from, you know, posting at 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. and oh, it's on the wrong day, then it takes away from the masterminding, you know, of
Yes.
what you want to put out there.
Yes, and you know, I wholeheartedly agree. Although I haven't, I must admit, I have not made great use of this to this point. But what you talk about, or what you say about looking at the bigger picture, right? And it's not that that work is menial. It is not that that work
Yeah,
is
and
easy.
I didn't,
It's
for lack
it's
of better
it's
words.
it's it's just that when you have the grand vision,
Yeah.
like there's, as you said, there's only so much time in the day, right? And in order for you to orchestrate the grand vision, sometimes that means that you need to be doing the high level thinking, and
Mm-hmm.
somebody else has to be doing some of this other stuff that is not necessarily high level, but it
Mm-hmm.
is equally as important. It's
There.
just,
Yeah.
but it's consuming time. And
Yes.
if you can't clone yourself, if you have to make a choice, am I going to do this? Am I going to post this thing, change the date on it or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
Or am I going to be working on this higher vision? And I
Yeah.
think that that's very important, that you, to have an awareness of that,
Mm-hmm.
and to understand that, yeah, I can't do anything, or I can't do everything. And like when I do YouTube videos, I love to edit them. I love watching them, and I'm putting the meme here, there, or whatever. But the thing is, my wife is always saying this to me, dude, you're an orthopedic surgeon. Like, what are you doing?
Right.
You pay somebody, most of the time it's her, but when it can't be her, it's like, pay somebody to do that so that you
Yeah.
can be working on the big picture. And I have to kind of, get outside of myself and go, oh yeah, she's right. you
Yeah.
know?
And I think that you and I, and those of us who just have the interest and have the ability to do all that stuff like editing, and like we're relatively tech savvy. Although I wouldn't guess that with me today and my troubles, but we're tech savvy and we can learn how to do that. Like for my podcast, I can learn how to edit a podcast. I'm confident that I could do it, but do I want to spend hours upon hours fine tuning the audio and the different levels of my podcast episodes? Or do I want to spend the time connecting with the individuals and asking and sourcing the guests to be on my podcast? Like I can do that. Only I can do that and be like, look, I'm an orthopedic surgeon and I've kind of taken this path similar to you. Being a woman in a male dominated field, I would love to have a conversation with you. Nobody can do that for me. And if I'm spending time trying to edit my podcast, then I'm not doing that. And I'm not thinking about the grand vision of my podcast, for example. And so I have an editor, that's another person that I do hire. I have somebody editing my podcast. I have somebody like packaging it and making it, sound good and putting it out there. So, that's all stuff that I could do, but I shouldn't, right? I should
Mm-hmm.
be focusing on the big picture.
Mm-hmm. So, we talked a bit about your podcast, but tell me, what is your preferred platform, and why is it and whatever it is, why is it your preferred platform? If you can only have one.
If I could only have one, dear.
You're on a desert island, and you are only allowed to have one. There's only enough bandwidth for one. What do you want?
Oh gosh. Well, despite the character limitation, I would say I really love Twitter. I I know I've like taken a full turnaround, because like if you asked me maybe, I don't know, 2 years ago, I'd be like, I don't get it. I'm not going on there. I'm just going to put my head in the sand and not go on Twitter. And it's like, I love Instagram. I love YouTube, but I love the efficiency of Twitter and the ability to connect with so many people who are like-minded. And that may change. I don't know. Next year I may tell you something different, but you're forcing me to choose one. It's like asking me to choose among my children. Of course, I have an only child, so bad analogy, but it's a hard decision, because there really are a lot of pros and cons to every single platform.
Okay, so here is a question. Let's go back to education for a moment. So, I'm a middle-aged orthopedic surgeon, and
Me too. Me
most
too.
of my colleagues, okay, that are my age, are not really savvy when it comes to social media, and I am only this way. I told you before we started, because of my children, and I have had a crash course from the inside from watching them in their careers. Now, but when I think about orthopedic trainees, and not even just orthopedic trainees, medical trainees today, okay, it is my personal opinion that social media, this is here. This is part of our life. This is an important method of communication for the general population. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that this is something that needs to be a part of our training. So my question to you is, what is your opinion on that? Do you think that orthopedic trainees and more generally medical trainees should be trained in social media use, and should they be taught to promote its use for education and communication with patients?
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. In fact, I'm going to be participating as a presenter in a webinar directed towards orthopedic residents through the AAOS on social media platforms and which platform is right for me and what are the pros and cons and how do we use it. I think it's really important. But it's funny. I think that generationally, you and I are in the same generation, but I think generationally, a lot of the incoming medical students and residents are way savvier than than a lot of us as far as just navigating the digital landscape. But I do think that having that as part of the curriculum is important because, I think that when you are a professional and you're on social media, you do have to approach it a little bit differently than, Facebooking with grandma and your neighbors and your besties from high school. It's not your personal page. And as I mentioned before, I let a lot of my personal life kind of shine through on what I do on social media. And I share my random thoughts. I share, funny things that happen. But you also have to understand that you are in the public eye. And so I think that that is still important. I'm not, and I fully stand by being authentic and kind of being yourself. But I also think that as physicians, we have a responsibility for what we put out there, and we still have to think about what we do in practice, what is considered, gold standard, and we can't just casually mention snake oil. And, we still we still have an obligation to be professionals. And we can be professionals online and still kind of show who we are. And so I think that is one thing to maybe educate our newer generation of surgeons on, is just kind of being mindful of that as we put ourselves online.
Most definitely, most definitely. And I have to remind myself sometimes, and sometimes my wife reminds me. I have my ex-football player, orthopedic surgeon, surgical suite voice, that sometimes I have to remember to put that voice back inside, because that voice is not really allowed on social media when if I get triggered. So I have to remember that
It
sometimes.
happens to all of us, right? I definitely have a constant internal, I've got little Nancy over here and little Nancy over here, and saying, you don't put that on there. There's an internal dialogue. And so fortunately, filter Nancy talks to id Nancy, and it all works out.
So it looks like you've been doing a fantastic job. So I think the appropriate Nancy has been winning out. So that's a good thing.
Let's hope so.
Okay, so tell me, Nancy, what is a perfect day for yourself? Okay,
Ooh.
so this is and for the purpose of this question, we're talking about a day where you're doing clinical duties, you're doing content
Mm-hmm.
creation. What's the perfect day?
Well, I think perhaps I will answer it in the context of, can I say a perfect week, because kind of different days are for different things.
Sure.
I really love it when I can have an entire day to just operate, and that's all I'm thinking about. I'm not thinking about clinic. And so, you know, I would have my dedicated OR days. I don't have to worry about being done with the OR on time to be able to make it to clinic because somebody's over there waiting for me. Like a perfect day would be operating in one spot. Um, the days where I'm like at two, occasionally three different places where I've got cases and I'm worried about start times, that's not optimal. And so like you know, having my discrete OR days, one place, like just show up there, operate, be done. But then I would obviously have my clinic time. Clinic is a necessary part of being a surgeon. You have to see your pre-ops and your post-ops and your consults. But I would also have a day or at least a half day sprinkled in there where I can focus on the content creation and like have uninterrupted time. And I would say also a perfect scenario for that, for the content creation and kind of working on my podcast is having a space other than my office and other than being at home with family, because sometimes it's very tempting to just be like, oh, you know, I can do this later, and I want to go down and see what's going on in the living room. And don't get me wrong, I really enjoy and put a lot of importance in family time, but to like be truly productive, like having that space where I can focus and concentrate and not have distractions is really important. That's one of the things I miss about having like a remote workspace, like a coffee shop or something like that, because of the pandemic. Like that's gone away temporarily. So I've had to make do. And so my perfect week would consist of that mix of days where I have, you know, uninterrupted OR time, OR days where I don't have to be elsewhere. And then I have discrete blocks of time where I can talk and network to people I want on my podcast, record my podcast, work on what I want to put on Instagram and or Twitter, and also YouTube. I also have a YouTube channel, which I would love to develop more as well.
So, you know, it's quite interesting that, you know, you talk about having this dedicated space and dedicated time. And that's one thing that I've realized over the past 2 years, that yes, I need to actually put on my schedule, say to my secretary,
Yeah.
look, this is this half day, like, and for me, generally speaking, that's Friday afternoon. I said, Friday afternoon, don't put anything in that time. That time is, I don't want to see extra patients then. I don't want to do any, like that time is time I'm using for planning content or filming content or whatever. And the other flip side of that, as you said, is the dedicated space. And my wife and I are realizing this both for the Dr. Chris brand, but also our Human 2.0 brand, and all the social media stuff that we do. Because right now we film a lot of stuff at the gym, and we try to do it at our gym when it's off hours. But you know, there's a garage next door, and you know, maybe you hear that kind of stuff, or you know, whatever, or the phones are ringing in the front because my secretary's answering that. And we keep talking about, if we moved our gym location, one of the things that we need to do with that is to have a space outside of the gym, outside of the clinic, that is dedicated to filming and content creation. That's all it is for, right?
You need a studio.
Yes, so you can go in there, shut the door. It's adequate lighting. It's soundproof. People know they can't disturb you in there once you're in there, and you can get it done, right? It's not at home, and it's separate from your workspace. It's just for content creation, right?
Yep, absolutely. I hear you. I started out doing all of my podcasts inside my closet next to my dirty laundry because that's the only place I could have some sound insulation and not be disturbed.
Yeah. Listen, man, you have to do what you have to do.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned COVID a little bit. So let me ask you, so I'm in Canada, and for us, fortunately, the situation is not quite as dire as it is for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
But let me, or please tell us, how has COVID impacted your work as an orthopedic surgeon? And then the second part of that question is, has social media use served to help or to hinder your work during this difficult and weird time?
Well, when we went into shutdown earlier in the spring, I think that was when we felt the biggest impact. When all elective surgeries were canceled, the PPE situation was dire. We just didn't know if we would have enough resources. So, obviously for the right reasons, elective surgeries were canceled. So from an orthopedic practice standpoint, I mean, it was like crickets around our office for a while. We sent people home, employees home. We kept everybody on payroll. We were very lucky in that our business was able to qualify for the PPP loan, so that we could keep paying everybody, even though they were at home and not working.
Oh, that's right.
We kept essential staff in the office. We never fully closed down, because we had to take care of fractures. We had to take care of post-ops. Just because we're on lockdown doesn't mean that all of a sudden you just kind of turn a blind eye to your post-op wounds. So, we really, and I laugh every time I say this, we had a skeleton staff. But we really sent a lot of people home to, if they could work from home, they could. We kept some of our clinical people in the office, and we just, it was just very quiet. We saw in person the people that we needed to see in person. But what was interesting, and what we never thought was possible before the pandemic, was that there actually is so much we can do by telemedicine. And it was fortunate that Medicare and the insurance companies followed suit to make some changes to allow us to be able to see patients by telemedicine legitimately, and still get reimbursed, so that we can pay our employees, so that we can keep our lights on. And so, that was one of the big pivots, was that we kind of experimented with Zoom and with other different platforms to be able to do telemedicine. And I found that we don't need to have the person out, living all the way out on coastal Oregon, drive the 2 hours in for me to say, hey, I looked at your MRI and this is what's wrong, and I think you don't need a surgery and I want you to do PT. You can actually do all of that by telemedicine and screen sharing, and a lot of that education and that dialogue can still occur. So that was one of the interesting discoveries that I think I made as a surgeon, and our field made, was that, hey, we need to utilize technology to help us practice a little bit more efficiently. And I think some of that's not going to go away. I'm going to keep doing some telemedicine because it just makes sense. And a lot of my patients love it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's yet another thing that changed for us during the pandemic. And then, of course, we opened back up, and then things were kind of sort of back to normal practice-wise. And with this winter wave that we're experiencing here, we've had to pull back a little bit with elective surgeries and some of the more complex surgeries that happen in the hospital. But I think the first time around, the ambulatory surgery centers and just kind of the medical community in general really paid much more attention to making sure we had adequate resources as far as PPE. And I think we're better off that way this time around. And so I haven't stopped any of my ASC surgeries, my ambulatory surgery center surgeries. Those have kept going, and they kept going strong. And inpatient wise, my healthier patients who are able to come in for a total shoulder and go home the next morning, I've been able to continue to operate. But only a small percentage of surgeries that are in more complicated patients, the patients that need skilled nursing home stays after surgery, have been pushed off and postponed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what was your second part of the question?
Well, just whether you think social media has either helped to hinder, or has helped or hindered you know, how you practice during this time?
I think, you know, I think maybe not so much my social media platforms directly impacting my clinical patients. But I will say, as I mentioned before, with these, you know, digital platforms such as Zoom and like a lot of other, I use doxy.me to hold my telemedicine conferences. That has influenced it a lot, and impacted it a lot for good. I will say from a colleague to colleague basis, social media has been fantastic during this time, because we can't, you know, we're not going to these big conferences. That like the thought of like going to Las Vegas to the convention center and being packed with 30,000 of my closest friends in orthopedics, like that's just like, oh no, not right now. Like I can't even imagine that. And so, you know, in lieu of that, I think that the social media platforms and like close your ears, Twitter in particular has been really great for continuing that conversation. And I think, like, for example, the AOS has really you know, tried to develop a much more robust digital program and you know, and webinar series. And so that's been good. It's not a one-to-one replacement, but it is a really great pivot during these times.
Mm-hmm. You know, and I echo a lot of that, and I do like the telemedicine, either DoxyMe or Zoom or whatever. I do like that because it has sort of changed a little bit how I practice, and although many of my colleagues say as soon as this is done, they're done with that, I'm like, no, man, I'm still going to have a portion of that in my clinic, just
Yeah.
because I find it's way more efficient for the most
Mm-hmm.
part. And initially people had trouble figuring out how to work DoxyMe or how to work Zoom. But now even my elderly patients, man,
Mm-hmm.
most of them now have it down. And I must admit, I'm still not quite sure how to get my physical exam on, on these
Yeah.
platforms, because you have to be very creative, right? Because
Yeah.
you're trying to tell people, oh no, medial lateral, no. You have to think about the terminology, and then you
Yeah.
have to try to explain, okay, we're going to do this special test. You have to explain how to move their arm in a certain way,
Yes.
when they have no understanding of medical terminology, and
Yeah.
you're trying to elicit some kind of finding, and it's just, I'm still trying to wrap my head around how to do that effectively. um, but I do like it, and I think, like, geez, I can conduct a clinic. I can do it I can be in my office at home,
Mm-hmm.
and and I'm done the clinic. I don't have to drive anywhere. I shut my laptop. I'm done the clinic, right?
Yeah.
And then I can go about doing whatever else I was doing. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that it's you know, it has opened our eyes, and I think that at least for me myself, and you know, for yourself, that's gonna stay. It's gonna be part of my, you know, it won't necessarily be as big as it is now, but
Right.
it's gonna stay a part of my clinical acumen for sure.
Definitely. I think there are a lot of things that we've learned during the pandemic that will, you know, so parts of it are going to stick with us. Like, you know, like even like mask wear in the cold season. Like I think I'm going to continue wearing a mask. I've been the healthiest I've ever been. I'm usually sick with colds and flus, and you know, and we as clinicians, we encounter, there's so many touch points with patients, and just like the common cold and flu going around, like I am a better and more efficient surgeon because I'm staying healthier.
Mm-hmm.
So like even just wearing a mask is you know, something that I'm probably going to hang on to, and I'm just going to mask up in clinic when cold season starts, even when the pandemic is behind us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's switch gears now, and you talked about this a little bit before, but let's go a little bit more in depth about it. Okay, so you're the founder of the 6%.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me specifically, what is the 6%, and more importantly, what is the core message that you seek to convey with the 6% podcast?
So the 6% number comes from one of the quoted figures for how many women are actively practicing in orthopedic surgery. And, a lot of people you don't see a lot of women, but, when I talk to my patients, friends, whoever, listeners, they are always surprised. It's like, wow, that is a very, very low number. And so that was the inspiration for the name of my podcast. But the birth of the podcast came when and it actually, I started thinking about this years ago when I was a resident. I didn't even know what podcasts were back then, but just the concept of women in traditionally male dominated fields and how we actually probably have a lot of things in common, a lot of common experiences. And it first came to me when I was flying. I was flying somewhere. I was going through an airport, and I saw a female commercial airline captain, and I was like, "Huh, you don't see a lot of those, you know." And I was like, "Huh, I wonder if if we kind of have experienced similar things, and had similar things said to us, and different challenges that we might have shared." And I never got to say anything to her. She walked this way, I walked that way, but I looked at her and I was like, gosh, I wish I could sit down and have a cup of coffee with her. She's a pilot, so I can't be like, hey, let's go have a cocktail. I don't want you to have a cocktail and fly plane. But yeah, I was like, oh, it'd be great to just sit down and chit chat. And so that stuck with me for a long time. And when I started to write more and blog more and get on social media and started to listen to podcasts myself, I was thinking, oh, that would be a really interesting concept. So, I kind of let it marinate. I started doing a little homework and, Googled everything like, how do I become a podcaster? And, finally put this together and started to gather guests and figured out the logistics of how to record a podcast and all of that. And so that all came to fruition, and I launched earlier this summer. When things shut down and I wasn't operating, and my clinics were cut down to 5 patients a morning because nothing was happening because of the pandemic. I was like, what do I do with all this time? Oh my gosh, I should podcast. And so I ended up getting all of that done and launching the podcast. And that was one of the silver linings of this year, is that I discovered this new passion and got to bring it to life and launch it. So, I talked to, as I mentioned before, I talked to women in all different career fields, like mechanics and, I mentioned CEOs and venture capitalists, but I also talked to the first woman chief of police in the US. She actually was here in Portland. She's almost 80 now. But I had the opportunity to interview her, and I've been so honored to be able to talk to these women who I normally would not have an opportunity to talk to. And especially with like Penny Harrington, it came at a time when what became just all this attention, rightfully so, to police brutality in the US and racial tensions and racial inequities. And it was interesting to talk to her. And then she agreed to have a bonus episode with me as she was getting ready to testify on the Senate floor on George Floyd. And I think I went through a bit of nervousness, saying, you know what, these are very hard questions I'm going to ask this person I don't know. But we talked about it in a really real sense. So it was just, it has grown into something so much more than I ever thought it would be for me. So it's just been this amazing journey for myself, and I hope for the listeners as well, just to learn about these interesting people, get some really good pearls for how to meet challenges that come up in life. and hopefully be inspired, be entertained.
Excellent. So I'm gonna put you on the spot again,
Again.
yes, man, you gotta be in the hot seat here. Um, so, um, considering the 6% and what you have learned in the 6%, okay, with all the guests that you've spoken to, um, if you had to boil it down, okay, what are your top 3 recommendations for any young women who are considering a STEM career, career in medicine, or in particular, a career in orthopedics? And you, you talked about some of the issues with yourself prior to going to orthopedics. And I even know a colleague myself who now is an emerged physician who wanted to be in orthopedics, but she had her own struggles with those issues. And ultimately, in the end, she decided that orthopedics, because of those things, wasn't going to be the thing for her. But, in her heart, that's what she wanted. So what is your recommendation for any of these young women out there who are considering these kind of careers?
I think one of the most important things is to listen to your heart, follow your gut. There are so many things that society, parents, whoever think that we should do. But really what matters the most is what you think you should do. And you're gonna have to have that internal dialogue with yourself to really know yourself, to know what you're supposed to do on this earth with the time that we have here. And I think that's the number one piece of advice. Number two, I would say that find and listen to the people that will lift you up. You're going to come across a lot of people who are going to be naysayers, and they're going to say, well, you can't do that. I mean, like, you're not strong enough to be an orthopedic surgeon. You're not going to, you're not going to thrive here. You won't do well. Whatever negative things that can be thrown your way, you kind of have to ignore them, and find the people who are going to say, you can do this, and listen to them. And I think that's so important. You got to be, put people around you that are going to lift you up and not cut you down. And don't, it's like, it's okay to get a little bit pissed off about that. But then you just got to let it go, and just say, meh, a little bit of thick skin is important. And third, I would say, don't be afraid to pivot when you feel like things aren't right. And and like when you and I were talking about before, would we ever give up the orthopedic surgery to do something else entirely and create content? I think when you are presented with a different opportunity, you kind of look at whether things fit into your idea of what your top values are. And sometimes things will shift and you'll be in a situation, whether it is school or a job or whatever, a project, where you find that this isn't right for you. And I'm not saying be a quitter, but also just be realistic about whether this is serving you and your purpose on this earth. And if it's not, don't be afraid to pivot and change gears just because it's scary to change, And so I think that's another important take home for folks who want to enter this path, or any path, really. I try to tell myself these things all the time and try to follow my own advice. So I make sure I stay on track.
Yeah, I love those answers, and I think all of those things are very important, and particularly listening, following your heart, and people say, "Oh, that's bullshit. That's text. That's storybook." But
That's number
ultimately,
one.
it's you have to, right? You have to be happy
Yeah.
with yourself first,
Yeah.
before anybody else can be happy with you, and before you can do anything that you are happy with. You have to be happy with yourself, right? And
Absolutely.
then, as you said, I've I've read so many books where they kind of echo the same sentiment, and they talk about you being the sum of the 5 closest people to you, and there's so much gold in that statement, and it is just that those are the people who will lift you up, right?
Yeah.
There are so many people that will cut you down, and there
Mm-hmm.
are we have this tendency in our head to magnify the effect of negative messages, but to
Yeah.
minimize the effect of positive messages. So
Right.
you don't need any help in having negative things, because we're good enough doing that to ourselves on our own, right?
Right.
You need to be around people that will build you up and support you and push you to higher level, right?
Exactly.
So I wholeheartedly agree with those, and I think those are excellent things for not just women, but people of color, people
Yeah.
who are you know less fortunate. Those are three excellent points for those type of people to consider, so that they can get to where they need to be successful in this life. So I thank you very much for that advice. So, last question: where can people find you online? They want to know, where can I see all of this stuff that Nancy MD is creating? Where can I find the 6%? Give it to us.
So my website is nancymd.com, and from there you can find just about all of my platforms. You can find my podcast, but you can also search for my podcast, The 6% with Nancy MD, on pretty much all the major platforms, Apple, Spotify, etc. I am on Instagram and I am on Twitter. My handle is _NancyMD. And I'm also on YouTube. You can search Nancy MD. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm kind of everywhere, but my major platforms are Instagram, Twitter, and also my YouTube channel and my website. So,
but no TikTok yet?
oh, I am on TikTok,
Are
but
you
I
on
am.
TikTok? I didn't add you on TikTok. I gotta look for you on TikTok. Are you at Nancy MD _Nancy MD on TikTok as well?
I think it's just Nancy MD. I'm pretty sure it's just Nancy MD. I'm a little bit new to TikTok, and that probably belies my age. And the stuff I have on TikTok, mostly fun. It's all the goofy stuff. That's my goofy stuff repository, is the silly side of me. I make little funny TikTok videos. So I'm just kind of dipping my toes in TikTok. So yes, I am on there.
Well, that's good. I'll add you there, but don't worry about the silliness, man, because I'll tell you, I'm like 97% silly
Yeah,
and
same.
only 3% serious. So, that just comes with wow, that's just me.
Yeah, same.
Anyway, so with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I want to thank you very much, Nancy, for spending this hour and a half with me. This has been a wonderful conversation. It has been very enlightening and very educational. And I hope for all of the people who are watching that this has been educational and interesting for you as well. Nancy has told you where where you can find her, and so please go do that. Check her out and check out the 6%. And with that, I'm gonna sign off, and I'm gonna wish everybody a happy New Year, because
Yeah.
this is New Year's Eve. Tomorrow's 2021, and I am hoping with all my heart that 2021 is a better year than 2020.
Yes,
Because
please.
2020 was
It will
something
be.
else.
It will
Yeah.
be. Happy
Anyway,
New Year to everyone.
there you go. So hang tight, Nancy, on Zoom. I'm going to sign off here, and I'll catch up with you in a second. So thank you very much, everybody. Catch you on the next one.